Having a scarcity mindset can make or break a business. So that is our little prelude of what we have for you in store today. Welcome to another episode of 30 Minutes with DailyStraits.com. This is your host, June Ramli. We have not one, but two special ladies with us today who are going to speak to us on the dangers of having scarcity mindset in business and how it can be detrimental if not addressed. On my right, we have Lina Patel of Refma Consulting, who is based in Melbourne, Australia. While on my left is Wellington-based Mary O'Keefe from Greaterthan. I hope I got your last name correct. A bit of background about both ladies. Let's start with Patel. Patel is a facilitator and collaboration designer who creates timely, respectful, and power illiterate ways of being, knowing, and doing. Her role when dealing with businesses is to help them elevate needless workplace suffering. Meanwhile, Mary is an experienced coach, facilitator, educator, and network weaver. She has delivered work, coach teams in the government, tech startups, private small businesses, social enterprises, and impact-driven ecosystems. So without further ado, we're going to bring in both ladies and start the discussion. So welcome to you both. Thank you so much, Lina, for joining us today from Melbourne, and Mary from Wellington. So how are you, Lina?
I am doing super well, June. Thank you so much for having us along today for this conversation. Really excited.
Awesome. And what about you, Mary?
Hi, June. Thank you. Thanks for the invitation. Yeah, I'm really well. It's the middle of the day here in Wellington. So, yeah, looking forward to this chat very much.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to dive right into the question. So Lina, just tell us a bit about yourself and what do you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm here as part of the Greaterthan team. Based in Melbourne, I'm a facilitator and a collaboration designer. Essentially what that means is I work with organizations when they want to bring people together to achieve something. So within an organizational context, it can be anything around a change they're wanting to make, and that can be kind of a long range thing or even something over a shorter period. Mary will do a much better job of explaining how we work at Greaterthan and the sorts of changes that we are particularly focused in supporting organizations with.
Awesome. Okay, Mary, so what about you? Tell us a bit about yourself and the work.
Thanks, June. So kia ora, my name is Mary O'Keefe. I am a partner at Greaterthan. My day-to-day roles are many things, but I think primarily I walk along with the Greaterthan team, organizations who are interested in exploring alternative ways of working. We do that work with our clients from a position of coaching, leadership coaching, team coaching, introducing new collaboration practices, new collaboration tools, all with this idea in mind that what we're ultimately enabling is more participative ways of organizing within our organizations. We are a distributed team. We're a remote first team. So we have people in Australia like Lina, and we also have team members across Canada, the US, across a lot of European countries. And so, yeah, we support clients all over the world, basically, to do work in new ways of working, and primarily those who are interested in different working paradigms such as self-managing organizations. And yeah, that's really sort of the work that we do. Lots of really talented, amazing people within Greaterthan, I have to say. Humbled by the lot of them.
Awesome. So it looks like you are the boss partner, right? I was curious, like, how do you recruit coaches? Like, how do you recruit them?
Yeah. So you might have. I laughed when you suggested I was the boss. There's no such thing really at Greaterthan. So we're a self-organizing team. We don't have a concept of bosses. The role of partners within Greaterthan, there are 6 of us. Our job is really to just steward the organization and make sure that our practices, our onboarding practices, how we relate to one another, how we, I guess, present ourselves in the world is stewarded effectively by the 6 of us. Partnership is not something that you have to have bestowed upon you, like it might be the case in sort of more traditional organizations. Anybody who's been an associate of Greaterthan for a period of time can step into a partnership role if they so feel called. Our recruitment process is also an interesting one. I guess it wouldn't be what you would typically describe as a traditional recruitment process. A lot of the people that join Greaterthan come through channels that are usually they are known to us, to an individual, or maybe many of the team members at Greaterthan, and generally will want to move into the organization because they do work that is quite similar to ours. They're quite values aligned, and they're also individuals who in their own businesses, I guess, have been experimenting for many years with alternative ways of working, alternative ways of organizing. And so we're sort of, we seem to have people drawn to us that recognize that there are alternative paradigms to the way that we work, and are excited by that, and have been working in that space, sometimes on their own for many years. That was true of me. I was sort of out in the wilderness on my own for a while before I kind of joined lots of other like-minded people.
So how many coaches do you have?
Wow. Currently, we probably have probably 7 or 8, maybe 9, 10 people who self-identify as coaches, both leadership coaches, organizational and team coaches. But then we have a lot of people who would be sort of kind of spanning the threshold between consulting and coaching. We also have a psychologist within the team. So she'd be sort of on the place where therapy and coaching sort of intersect. So yeah, many of us are on the spectrum, if you like, and practice lots of different things. As coaching is one of the skills, I guess, that we bring.
Okay, great. So that's the business side of things. So I just wanted to ask you, so the specialty with your Greaterthan organization is basically business, right? You work with business and you help them go through the barriers that's stopping them from getting, from A to Z or becoming greater than what they were from yesterday. So, and also I kind of like found out that, you work with businesses, you coach them on their mindset. So, and it was something to do with scarcity mindset. So basically, like, just give us a lowdown. What is scarcity mindset?
I'm going to invite Lina to maybe just answer this. As we were prepping for today's conversation, she said something to me this morning that made my spine tingle. So now I'm going to invite her to share it with you, because it was quite striking, I think.
So this thought occurred to me as I was making my cup of coffee this morning. Broadly speaking, if for any of your listeners who aren't familiar with the concept of a scarcity mindset, it's essentially where you operate in the world with the sense that there isn't enough to go around. And so what that can lead to is being very protective of what you have, not being as generous with what you have in terms of sharing. It tends to be the thing that underlies when people operate with a very competitive mindset, and if they can't sort of celebrate other people's wins because they see other people's wins as their loss. So scarcity mindset is sort of operating with this idea that there isn't enough to go around, and that when you do gain something, you have to sort of hoard it and secure it, and that it's not really available to share generously with others. And that can be about material objects, or around time, or around relationships, around all sorts of things. And the thought that occurred to me this morning was that what we notice in our work is that that the sort of the scarcity mindset is misplaced, in that in general, rather than treating natural non-renewable resources as scarce and sort of treating the natural world and how we operate with natural resources as scarce, because the reality is that those things are scarce. Instead, we think that things like relationships and ideas are scarce, and that we need to kind of hoard and protect those. So a lot of the work that we do is, I suppose, part of our work is around being respectful of the limitations of kind of planet Earth, and sort of trying to, live and operate and run our businesses in a way that isn't depleting our natural resources, down to the ground. And instead kind of think about, well, those things are scarce, and it's appropriate to think of those things as scarce. But what isn't scarce is actually people's potential, like the potential of your team members, the ideas that they bring, and the energy that they bring. So that's kind of yes, there's a scarcity mindset, but we wish it was focused on natural resources rather than on the potential of people in workplaces. So that's kind of our sort of current sort of take on the scarcity mindset. Does that answer your question around what we mean by the scarcity mindset?
Yeah, so it's a problem that every businesses face. So would workplace jealousy, like if someone gets promoted over you, even though you've been in the organization way more longer than the other person, is that scarcity mindset?
That's interesting. At an individual level, yeah. Mary, how?
Yeah, that is an interesting one. I mean, I guess you could say yes, because it probably, I mean, from the perspective that we sort of come from, and certainly the themes or the patterns that we see in organizations that seem to recur again and again. One of the things that we do is Greaterthan is to kind of step back a little bit and go, well, okay, if people are behaving this way within the organization, if these patterns are present and they're consistent and they are the way we are, the way we work, what we're really most curious about in Greaterthan, I think, is actually understanding what are the systemic elements that make up the cultures within those sorts of organizations. And one of the things that has become pretty evident to us over the many years that we've all been working in both distributed organizations, and a lot of the work we do in Greaterthan, particularly when we're exploring new ideas, we'll work on ourselves, we'll try these techniques, we'll explore these questions and conversations internally before we introduce them to clients. But one of the things that we're definitely seeing is sort of the story of what our organizations have been for the last 50, 100 years, and it's been a story that was fashioned during the industrial age, when the sense of the individual and how the individual shows up in the workplace is a very particular story, and it is a story of individualism. It is a story of competition. It is a story of, as Lina said earlier, people fighting for the limited resources that are available. And by resources in this context, I don't mean people. I don't refer to people as resources. We're humans. But in that context, it's really sort of thinking about, what if in a complex world, we acknowledge that the way to sense into complexity can only be done together. So if you think of complex adaptive systems in nature, if you think of migrating birds, if you think of bees, the patterns of behavior in complex adaptive systems, and humans are animal complex adaptive systems, is really to work together. It's to sense together. It's to take each of the individuals within the system, but know that every single person has a perspective to bring. Their perspective will be unique. And this idea that if you create space within your organizations to hear the individuals as a collective, that's a great way to build resilience within your organizations. And I think it's that understanding that's at the heart of what we do. You know, if you think of Greaterthan, there's actually a really cool graphic on our website, which shows a Venn diagram, and you know, it's that understanding the system, not the technology system, but the ecosystem, and how that marries with understanding and building capacity in us as individuals. And so in those two pieces intersecting together is really where Greaterthan works. It's in, you know, building system awareness and helping organizations to understand and see their system, because then when you can see it, and you'll never see all of it, that's impossible, okay? But for the parts that are obvious, that could be made more explicit, you can start making decisions about how you are when you have that knowledge. If that makes sense.
And just to pick up on what Mary was saying, to amplify that, by system we mean the context in which you're operating, which includes other organizations and other people and other factors that are, you know, all kind of influencing your particular organization. That an organization doesn't necessarily have a hard boundary line around it based on who is on the payroll and who's not on the payroll. Yeah. That as a collection of people, you're all influenced by, you know, policy and regulation and the specific location you work and the market that you're in and your customers or clients, or so all of these things. When we say understanding the system, it's about having a broader sense of where you fit in to the bigger picture of whatever your work is.
Okay, so for the benefit of the listeners, right, can we dumb it down into an example of maybe a case that the both of you worked on an organization level, probably an SME level, not too many people. So what is it that you go in, and what is it that you help break or change or whatever?
Great. I can pick this up, and Lina, feel free to jump in. I guess the approach that we take usually with our clients, be they large or small, across any sector, is one where we go through an exploration stage or a discovery stage. And usually in that, it's about us getting to know you, the client, and vice versa, ways of working, you know, understanding needs, getting a sense of really what challenges, I guess, or what hopes and dreams you might have as an organization. And so we tend to be brought in primarily by founders, very often executive level. But we will also, I mean, we you know, there are many entry points into the teams that we work with. So then what we will do, you know, sort of following or as part of that exploration, is look for ways to help the organization to see itself. And so what we will usually do in that context is, as we're in the discovery phase, we will be looking for opportunities to run what we call experiments that are designed with the organization in mind. So all of the work that we do is in a co-designed way, right? So we won't come in and say, you need to do this, tick this box. That's not the way we approach our work at all. So then what we'll tend to do is begin a sort of a journey of, the idea with an experiment is you are looking for opportunities to see how the organization responds to potentially a new way of working, potentially a new practice of working. Maybe we'll introduce a collaboration tool. And what you're doing when you actually set up that experiment, and experiments are always bounded, you know, they don't tend to go on for very long periods of time. But what you're doing is you're putting these probes into the organization to see what sort of feedback you're getting from the organization. You know, is this a good idea? Is this something that's exciting people? Is this something people want to get behind? Generally speaking, if you get that response about potentially changing an element or many elements of how you work, that's normally an organization that is responding in a positive way to this change that you're proposing. Very often, the change proposed is a combination of the skills, the tools, the practices that we bring from working this way for over 10 years, alongside with all of the knowledge and all of the wisdom that already exists in the organization. So it's a sort of a marriage of those two things. The experiments are designed with that in mind. once experiments are showing that they look like they're actually a good idea, that they're healthy, that they're not going to impact the organization in a negative way, we tend to amplify those. So look for ways and opportunities within the organization to amplify what's already producing a positive effect and is having a good, healthy, positive effect. There are numerous situations where we go, oh no, the timing might be wrong for this, or this isn't what people want, or this is causing too much disruption right now. Maybe we need to just stop this particular path and look for alternatives. So you're in this continuous cycle always of continuously dropping experiments in, getting the feedback, embedding practices if they look like they work. Because I mean, the reality, June, and you'll know this, and I'm sure Lina has countless examples. Every single organization is different. Every single organization has different needs. And so this idea that you can pick up and plonk down a template that will produce the same results in every organization is just naive.
So that's interesting, because we were just we're still in the pandemic, but, in the early stages, a lot of companies, they went really hard on the vaccine thing, mandated it. If you don't get a vaccine, you will get booted out of the company. And a few people lost their jobs because of that. So some companies, they don't engage your services and do this kind of experiments. They just change the rules within a day. What's the effect on that? It's my company. I'm paying you the salary. Why should I go through the motions of getting feedback? You're supposed to. As an employee, you're told you're paid to do what we ask you to do. So, what is your feedback on that?
Lina, I'm conscious I've been using lots of words.
No, quite
Would you like some space?
Okay, Mary. I mean, I suppose with the vaccine example, I mean, our perspective on that might be that we do value public health measures, and so sometimes taking action, individual action that's for collective good, 100% on board with that. I guess there's an interesting way even how you framed that question. I'm paying you, so you should do what I want you to. I suppose in the kind of ways of working that we are advocating, we would the nature of that working relationship we wouldn't even define it in that way. We would be sort of looking to say, well, is there a value exchange happening there? So it isn't that the company or the business owner owns the people. So it's that they are there for a fair value exchange. So, I rock up with my skills and talents and energy and enthusiasm and my time and my attention. And that is a really valuable thing for somebody to kind of offer to anyone's business, and in exchange for that the business owner is paying them a fair wage and all of that sort of stuff. So I guess in our when we think about working, even the nature of that working relationship is something that we support businesses to shift and change. So that there is a sort of a fair value exchange there, and that the people who do show up and are coming to your business to do whatever it is that you're doing are there wholeheartedly, and they're not going home and tallying up a resentment bill, which they're going to, who knows who they issue that resentment bill to, but that there's a bit more of a bit more of a sort of a generosity back and forth. As people are showing up to work. So I think there's kind of like a piece in here that, we're hoping to kind of move people towards these different ways of thinking about their work and their working relationships, and also supporting leaders in how they think about their roles. Like, what does it mean to be a business owner or a leader in an organization? Mary, are you able to kind of speak a little bit more on this kind of the leadership styles thing? Because I think June's given us such a beautiful launching point into, sure, that's one way you can think about your employees, What might be other ways, Mary?
Yeah, it's thanks, Lina. I mean, what's really came up for me, June, when you framed that question was, and I see it all the time, and we see it all the time at Greaterthan. And again, it's part of understanding the context and part of understanding what's actually going on in this moment when, as a leader in the organization, I am bringing my leadership, I'm being of service. And one of the things, and I think particularly in the pandemic, and we saw it everywhere, and completely understandably, compassionately saw it everywhere. The whole world was in what, I guess, when you think about complexity theory, was in this sort of chaotic moment. And there's a wonderful decision-making framework that was developed by a chap called Dave Snowden many years ago. And I was fortunate enough to study with Dave a number of years back. But I use his model every day when I work with organizations, because it feels like it makes sense in the context of the world. And so, what Dave would say, in the context of the unknowable, we can't predict the future. In that sort of space, you're looking at sort of the complex, the complex world that we live in, the complex adaptive system that our organizations are. And there are particular types of leadership styles that are really effective and almost would be good to be the dominant types of leadership in complex environments. And the style of leadership that you're looking for in a complex environment is a leader who supports and understands that if the organization has an opportunity, individuals in the organization have an opportunity to add their skills, their what they notice into the middle of the conversation, that the organization will be better placed to deal with the complexity that faces it. And I think, when we think about the pandemic, the type of leadership that was called for in many cases in any chaotic situation is actually, quite an authoritative style of leadership. In the case of an emergency, we can't have many people trying to decide together collectively what the best decision might be if the building is on fire. And so to have an individual take charge and say, this is what we do in this situation, is actually quite an appropriate style of leadership in that particular context. And I think one of the, invitations to leaders all over the world, now that the pandemic is starting to shift, we are starting, I don't even know what the definition of normal is anymore, but as we come out of the pandemic, to almost relax, the need to hold tightly to that way of being is starting to relax. And, so what is shifting more into a leadership style that is appropriate in sensing complexity? Because I think, when I look at the opportunities that have been afforded as a result of the pandemic, I don't know that we're even tapping in potentially to what we could be doing as a way of organizing ourselves, of engaging people within the organization, of developing skills and talents and strengths. Because I think the other thing that's probably worth mentioning is just even our understanding of what leadership is as a Greaterthan organization. When we think of leaders, we don't think of people at the top of a pyramid who tell everyone what to do, or even people at the top of a pyramid who support others to make decisions about the organization, or to have agency and autonomy within their work. There's a central sort of idea that every single one of us has potential to lead in a particular situation, in a particular context, based on who we are and our talents and our experience and our strengths, and that we can, that sort of sense of dynamic leadership, bringing your leadership, you have to create containers in an organization, or scaffolding, as we call it, in an organization, to have people step into their leadership. If you don't create those spaces, people have nowhere to step in.
Awesome answer. So, okay, I just wanted to find out more about how someone engages you. So say if a Commonwealth Bank is interested to tap into your services, so take us through the motions, right, on how they can approach you first. What entails in the discussion, like how do you find out what kind of help they need? And from what I gather, I guess this business is the cost is tailored according to the needs of each businesses, right? So there is no fixed cost. It depends on what you need. And also how you come up with that cost, like the costing, right? Is it an hourly thing, or is it based on the experience of the coach? Like maybe if the coach is 20 years old and she's got a Harvard degree, you pay more for that. Like how do you do this? Like, yeah.
Ooh.
I mean, we have
Where?
different pricing approaches, so that's really interesting. Even amongst us as a collective, we have different pricing approaches. So, so Mary, do you want to talk through well, firstly, they can visit our website, greaterthan.works with an S on the end. But Mary, how once people have made first contact, what ensues?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And I'm chuckling because you've just exploded a money conversation in my brain, but I'll pause that for a moment. So yeah, Lina's absolutely right. Like most people, they'll either come to us through word of mouth, either because we have worked with other organizations and they know the story, they're excited, they want to engage us. So that's definitely one way that a lot of our work comes in. And another way our work comes in is actually through the teams, the actual Greaterthan team itself. So again, the individuals, because we are all individual businesses, if you like, that come together to work on projects. So a lot of our work will come in that way also. So if you do contact us through hello@greaterthan.works, the first thing that you will do, we have a first responder, if you like, and you will, there'll be an email conversation with you. Then what we tend to do is we will pull together, we usually work in pairs or more. We don't tend to work as individuals. It's sort of one of the advantages of being a collective is that, and we know that we're greater than the sum of our parts. So as much as possible, we tend to work in pairs as a sort of a co-lead situation. We will then have a conversation with you, get a sense of what it is you're looking for, what you need. I think by and large, virtually all of the work that we're doing at the moment tends to be with individuals and with organizations who have a sense that there is a better way of working. Okay, so I think what we don't do is work with organizations that want to continue working in the way that they do. Okay, so that distinction is probably really important. So then what we will do is we will have that initial conversation, and then we'll have a sense from that conversation what kind of engagement we're likely to have with you as an organization. And at that point internally, we will start pulling together a potential team. It may be that the exploration stage is slightly longer, in which case you might continue with the pair that has paired up, and maybe one or two others. But ultimately, what we will try to do is meet your needs with the people that we have available at that time. We share many similar, skills, and we share many similar levels of experience. So we're very able to sort of cross interchange, etc. How we price work is, yes, definitely based on the individual, and then how we agree internally around the pricing of that work will depend on project by project. But we don't pay ourselves salaries at Greaterthan. We have a practice which we call Happy Money Stories. So for the team that works on the projects, we get together once the project is either finished or if we're paid on a monthly basis, And through a happy money conversation, we distribute the funds that have come into Greaterthan based on contribution, based on the needs of individuals on the team at the time. So an example of a need might be, I have an electricity bill that is 3 times larger than I thought it might be this month. And I need some support financially. I need some support. So that will all be added to the mix. And then we will use a consent-based decision-making process to distribute the funds.
Wow, that's great. So am I right to say that everyone is working on a volunteer basis at the moment?
No.
No,
We work.
no.
We work for money.
We work for money. So I
Yeah.
mean, I guess to expand on what how what Mary was explaining, rather than having a fixed salary and getting a fixed paycheck every week or month or however often people get paid, instead it's project based. So much like if you're a solo consultant, you earn your money when you sell a project. But the way we divide that money up, so particularly because we work as team, there's always 2 of us on some, at a minimum 2, and expanding out from that. Because there's always more than one of you, the amount that how you split that amount is a conversation that happens between the people who are working on that project. So we're not working on daily rates. We're not buying each other's time. We're not kind of commodities. Our time is not a commodity in that way. So it's about the value that you have delivered. And it may be that you may have done what may seem like a small, easy thing for you, didn't take much time, but for the rest of the team, that thing you did made a massive difference. So it may have been, I don't know, you maybe only were involved in one meeting, but your contribution in that one meeting made a really big difference to the whole project for that month, or for for the life of the project. So that value would be recognized. So it's we don't sell our time in that sense. And so that's kind of another thing, which is like a different way of working, because we have a different kind of relationship to the value that we bring, and we have a different relationship with each other as to how we value each other and factor in, our kind of life circumstances as well.
Awesome. So this is great. So one in each client, right? What's the maximum timeline? Do you take 2-3 months to work with them? I mean, or what, within a week?
Multi-year.
Multi-year. Wow.
Organizational change takes time.
Takes time.
Yeah.
So multi-year, like what, a minimum of 2 years? 2 years?
It really depends. Yeah, it really depends. So I guess this is where, the different types of work, we have an academy on the Greaterthan, it's part of the Greaterthan piece of work. So sometimes we may come in and we may run internal training that lasts for 3 months. That's, one example. And that's a very specific, closed piece of work. But all of the organizational work that we do, particularly organizations that, as we described earlier, they understand that the paradigm is shifting. They understand that this new paradigm, this new way of being, this new way of working, this new sort of generative integrated organization, that work takes time, because the story of the old paradigm, what Lina was beautifully describing right at the beginning, this, the story of extraction, this, continuous, this idea that the world is continuously giving, and recognizing that it's about shifting the conversation to a different place, which is the world is limited, the resources are limited in the natural world. But actually asking the questions of your organization, in particular when we think about, in terms of scarcity, it's sort of coming back to thinking about, what is the potential in the organization? It takes time to see that. It takes time to sense into it. And so most of the time that we work with clients, we're looking at an average of 2 to 3 years. And I think it's a really important point to note, from the moment that we arrive in an organization, we are trying to make ourselves redundant in that organization by putting as much of our time into building the capacity to do this within the organization itself. So we have no interest as a team in developing any sort of a need for us on an ongoing basis. So success for us looks like you're doing it. You know, you're adopting these practices. There's energy in the organization, and that the change is being led by the organization, supported by us.
Awesome.
And
so
I
how
think-
is this?
oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just building on what Mary mentioned. I guess one thing we observe is that people can operate with the sense of like a scarcity of time, and we're sort of trying to flip that and say, you need to actually take the time. Like if you think you can change your ways of working just like that, that's just not the reality of how people change and how we are as people. And I think, Mary, kind of worth noting the ways in which we engage with our clients, that can go from kind of like one-on-one coaching with just kind of one person and supporting them in their, leadership journey and how they can influence change from their positions of leadership. The sort of the training piece, which is quite contained. Training course has a start, middle, end. And then there's kind of that ongoing accompaniment piece. Is there another way in which, and those all have different sort of time frames, and we're working either with one person, a team, a whole organization. So we're working at different scales in terms of the number of people and different depth in terms of, the ground we cover with those people. Is there would there be a fourth, fifth, sixth way?
No, I think you've categorized beautifully broadly. I think the other really is just focusing on the practices that we use. So a lot of it will be workshop based, dialogue based. Really sort of building up that the relationship building capacity in all of us as individuals. So, as Lina said, we might focus one-on-one coaching with individuals to help them build their capacity to be more productive, I guess, for want of a better word, in actually relating to each other as a team. Because really, again, you're shifting from this individual culture, the culture of me, to the culture of we. And so what do each of us as individuals, as the me's, need to build in ourselves and know about ourselves and learn about ourselves, so that when we show up to be in the we are of service to others, and we're of service, to the purpose, and that we kind of understand how to wrangle our egos a little bit. That's really important. You can't be a we if you're driven primarily by your own ego. Well, you can, but you won't get very far.
You won't get far.
So how do you do this coaching? Is it online now, or do you go to the site and speak to the person?
Depends. Yeah, both. Yeah, both.
Yeah.
Both, and both and
So
all.
was this a pandemic-proof business? Did you guys have an issue during COVID?
We thrived.
We were busier, honestly.
We were busier than ever.
We were busier in the pandemic than we had been prior. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. I think, a lot of the work we were getting in the early days of the pandemic there was very specific patterns, and a lot of it was, can you help us make use of social technologies? And I'm not talking about just simply technology, technology products that allow collaboration and, collective decision making and distribution of funds, like Co-Budget and Lumio and all of the other great tools that have come out of Inspiral over the years. But also what we describe as social technology, so it's what I was describing. How do I build the capacity in myself to show up? Because I think one of the biggest challenges that we were seeing is teams were really struggling, not just with being at home and being isolated and being alone, but the technology, the need to be online was actually showing up as a team that just didn't know how to be in relationship to each other. So there was a lot of that in the early days. How do we team under the circumstances, and what new skills might we need to learn? So we did a lot of work with organizations during the beginning of the pandemic in those two spaces. Give us better tools, teach us how to use them, but also give us better practices so we can be together and look after each other. Yeah.
I mean,
Okay,
it's sort of just telling that the way Greaterthan was set up, in a sense, was really well placed for a situation like, none of us could have imagined there'd be a pandemic, right? However,
Yeah.
these ways of working that, we have been practicing for years and years and years before, meant we were very well placed to kind of do well at that moment in time, and it's kind of continuing on still for us.
And we were just standing on the shoulders of giants. I think that's important. While we are working in a unique way, I guess, in terms of Greaterthan and the work that we do with clients, there is a long history before us of people who have been thinking about complex adaptive systems, have been thinking about shared economies, have been thinking about, new economies. And we're just fortunate enough to have worked with a lot of those people who have sort of helped us embed and integrate a lot of that, amazing thinking that was done decades before we arrived on the scene. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, I have one final question. So this is really good. A good thing that businesses should have, but some might be apprehensive about spending money on your services for whatever reasons. So especially companies that have a high turnaround, like people who don't stay in the organization, mainly startups, they tend to have a high turnaround. So what would be your message for them, for these companies?
Dumbstruck, which is unusual for me. I mean, I guess my message for these companies would be, particularly in the startup space, your products could be outstanding. Your product may transform the world, but your people will be what creates and sustains and helps your business thrive and succeed. Customers will only take you so far, so I think acknowledging that your people are what matter most, and people who feel invested in, listened to, able to participate in the decision making around the organization and the future of the company, those people will stick around. Your turnover may not be as high. And in my own experience from working on high performing teams, and I realize now, 30 years into my career, that that's unique, that a lot of people have never had that experience, which really makes me sad. But yeah, I think that's at the heart of it. I was lucky enough to work with amazing bosses who got that, who understood that at the heart, that it was about the team, it was about the people, and all of their efforts were put into that first and foremost, and then the good fortune flowed as a result.
Yeah, actually, that's a great answer, because startups tend to squeeze every dollar from the employee, not giving them time to, some employees might have really good ideas, like how to bring the company forward. Yeah, that's a good.
And I'd be keen to hear Lina's perspective, because you've been around as long as I have.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's interesting because I kind of think, well, I suppose for those founders, who might want to be thinking about what legacy are they leaving. So if you want a legacy of a long line of broken people that you crushed the soul out of, sure, keep doing what you're doing. Whereas if you want your legacy to be, everybody who kind of came through your doors and spent some amount of time contributing to the product that, has kind of gone on to bring you whatever level of fame and wealth and prosperity, like what's the legacy you want? Do you want that kind of group of people to be people who are proud to say that they had some association with you and, were connected to you and felt like they were appreciated? Or do you want your legacy to be, a long whatever that turnover is, every one of those people is a person that, got burnt out under your leadership. And I don't know, that just feels really compelling to me. I'm like, well, in my final moments when I'm taking my final breath, I hope that I can look back at everybody who ever sort of worked under whatever my leadership was, that that I missed, that I'm a person that was beloved to them, not a person that they have horrible thoughts about because I treated them horribly. So there's kind of a piece there around for founders who have a sense of what their legacy might want to be in regards to the relationships that they made possible at work.
Awesome. That's a great answer. So, all right, that is all the time that we have for today. We have just been speaking to Lina Patel and Mary O'Keefe. Both of them are from Greaterthan, and one is in Wellington and another one is in Melbourne. So thank you so much, ladies, for giving us a really good explanation on what you do and how you can help businesses, and regardless of any size, and why it is important to get your services. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks for having us, June.
Great talking to you. Thanks, Lina.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.